Welcome to May 2025 block of the month, and this time we're going to be doing a small version of the flower block that we did last month, and then we're going to put it in one of the Dresden plate settings. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So very much the same construction as last time, just kind of a miniature version. So we're going to start off with our yellow square kind of on point, and I'm going to match up the corner, the 90-degree corner of this white triangle, and we're going to stitch along that edge. Okay, and then I'm just going to finger press that back, and it looks like that. Now here I'm going to go ahead and just chop that point off, and then when I line up this one, I just have a straight edge to line it up to. So I'm just starting at that corner. Okay, and we'll pop that back, and there we go. Then now we can go ahead and add our orange and red strips kind of in a log cabin fashion. So we'll start with the orange. And I'm going to use the smaller one, and we're going to line it up at this corner of the yellow square. And then we're going to start stitching from that side. And I kind of overstitched just to make sure that I had captured that white triangle there in my seam. Okay, and I'm going to fold that back, and now I'm going to take the longer orange and line it up on this side, starting at this 90-degree spot and going all the way down that side. Okay, I'm going to finger press that back, and so there we go. Now we're going to keep adding. We're going to start with the reds. And again, I'm going to start with the shorter one on this side. And I'm lining it up down here at this 90-degree angle. Okay, and then finger press that back. And then we're going to add our last red on this side. Okay, I'm going to finger press that back. And then we've got that part complete. Let's go give it a press and a trim. Okay, we're ready to go ahead and trim this up. So I have a longer ruler here, and I have a spot here where there's a crosshair, like these lines intersect, and it gives me a 1/4 inch intersection point there. So I'm going to line that right up on the corner of the top part of that yellow square. And what I'm trying to do is get a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, and then I'm going to trim across the top part. But I am using these lines as kind of like a reference. They go right along the sides of that yellow box so that I know that I'm going in a straight direction. And then I'm going to trim across the top, making sure I have that 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, that's done. And then we know that this is going to measure 6.5 inches wide when we are done with the block. So I am going to then do some markings again, just to kind of give me a visual of where that 6.5 is. Okay, so I have a 6.5 inch ruler, and I'm going to line up a line here on the top, and then this ruler has a center marking right there. So I'm going to put that right through the center of all of the yellow, orange, and red. Okay, and then when I feel like that's good, I'm going to draw some lines here, and that's just giving me a visual reference of where I'm going to be trimming that when I come back. Okay, now that I've got my side edges marked here, I'm going to put my ruler on the area again, and I'm lining up a line here. And this needs to measure 3.5 inches tall. So I am measuring down 3.5 inches, and then I'm going to cut off this bottom red part. And I'm lined up there at the top, so I can just cut that off. And then we're ready to add on the side triangles. So here I'm going to kind of eyeball it. I'm going to go about a 1/2 inch over there. But one thing you can do is fold this corner that we just cut up to the drawn line to find our halfway point, and then crease the white triangle to find the halfway point there, and then go ahead and match those up. And then we can pin that right sides together, and then we'll stitch a 1/4 inch away from the edge of that seam. So when I've got it on here at the halfway, it is about 3/4 of an inch on the longest white side here that's overhanging. So it is oversized, and we'll trim it down when we get both sides added. But let's go ahead and sew that seam now. Okay, I've got both white triangles added and pressed, and now we're ready to trim. So this section is going to be 3.5 by 6.5, and I've lined up my 3.5 line along the top part of the flower, and it also matches up with this bottom part here of the red. And then it is 6.5 inches wide, so I'm going to be able to just go ahead and trim on 3 sides. Okay, and then the top part of our flower unit is complete. Now we can work on the leaf units. Okay, we're ready to snowball all the corners on our square green leaf units. And these are some tiny little pieces. So I would recommend starching. Starch all your fabrics before you cut it. That gives it a little bit more body and stability, so you can place it where it needs to go. Know that it's going to kind of stay there. It just helps working with those tinier pieces. And then I'm going to stitch on the line. And I'm just going to work all the way around all 4 sides. Okay, I'm going to go set those seams and then press them back. Now we're ready to add the side white piece onto our leaf unit. And it is a rectangular shaped, and you'll be able to tell which way it needs to be turned because it's only long enough to fit one way. So it needs to go that way. If I tried to line it up this way, it's much shorter, and so we know that that's not correct. So we're going to go to the side that's the same length, and we're going to stitch that on. And doing the same on the other one. going to kind of finger press those back. Okay, and then I'm going to kind of orient them so that they look like they would look in the block as far as placement. And then on one side, we're going to have a bigger unit on the bottom and a smaller piece on the top, and then reverse on the opposite side. So on the left side, we're going to have the bigger piece at the top and the smaller piece at the bottom. And so what happens then, these will just be a little bit offset when we put our stem unit on there. So now we can just go ahead and add those. And then give those a press, and we'll add the other side as well. Okay, and I've pressed those back to the white parts that we just added, and then we're going to go ahead and sew the green center stem to each side of the leaf. So I'm just going to line that up. Okay, and I'm pressing that, finger pressing it to the green side, and then I'm going to add this side on. Okay, and then I'm going to press that again. And then we're ready to add that to our flower unit. Okay, so now I have the flower unit, and we're just going to match that right up to the leaf unit. And you can pin it if you want. Okay, and let's see what that looks like. Looks good. Now I'm going to go ahead and add sides and top borders to this block so we can turn it into an applique. Okay, now I've drawn my circle onto some interfacing, and then I've laid it right sides together on top of the flower block that I just pieced, and then I'm going to kind of line it up. And I'm looking for, here's the center, so I'm kind of lining it up with the center seam there. The center here kind of goes right up through the leaf and, or the stem and the flower unit there. And then I'm kind of looking at these corners, and they look to be about the same size. So when you're happy with the placement, then you can go ahead and add some pins. And then we're going to stitch right on that drawn line. Okay, I think it's ready to go. Okay, I'm at my machine that I can do my straight stitch and applique stitch on, and I've got an open toe foot so I can see really good where that circular line is, and then I'm going to stitch right on that line. Okay, I've just oversewn that by about 1/2 inch, and I'm going to trim that. And then I'm going to take out my pins. And then we're going to cut 1/4 inch away from that drawn line. Okay, and then I am going to pull the interfacing away from the block center, and then I'm going to just cut a little X so that I can turn my block right side out. So I just cut the interfacing, and then I'm going to just gently turn it right side out. And then I'm just going to go around and kind of poke out the edges and then press it real flat. Okay, I have my applique circle completed, and I've positioned it on my Dresden blades, and I feel like I have it centered. And what I was kind of doing is like I've got a center mark here and just trying to keep everything centered like right down through there, and then lined up centered across this seam. And then I gently just lifted it up on the sides and made sure that it's about 1/2 inch covering the seams. Just make sure it's covering on all sides. And then we can go ahead and I'm going to pin it in place, just lifting it up gently so that that stays nice and flat. Well, maybe. Okay. And then we'll just come back with our same blanket stitch, or if you've zigzagged it or straight stitched, whatever your applique method is, we're going to go ahead and applique that onto our Dresden blades. Okay, I've trimmed the block to the right size that it's supposed to be, and it is all finished. Thanks for watching.